Welcome, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to this first day of our second U.S. Antarctic Science Meeting. My name's Deneb Karenz. I'm a professor at the University of San Francisco, and I'm the U.S. delegate to SCAR, and I'm also the SCAR Vice President for Science. And before we get started, I wanted to make some acknowledgements. U.S. SCAR is funded by a grant from the National Science Foundation, Office of Polar Programs, and section of Antarctic Sciences. And we are incredibly grateful to have that funding and support from NSF, because it has made a really big difference in the way that U.S. SCAR operates and how we have become, I think, much more effective in interacting with the U.S. Antarctic science community. And then I also wanted to mention that my university, University of San Francisco, is providing the Zoom services for this meeting. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the NSF funding for U.S. SCAR. The intent of this funding was to facilitate more interaction within the U.S. Antarctic community, and also to encourage and increase the participation of U.S. scientists in SCAR. And in a few minutes, I'll actually talk more about SCAR. I know there are a lot of you that are familiar with SCAR, but for those of you who are not, I'll give a little bit more of an overview. But the funding from NSF is being used for a number of things. It's going to support travel for U.S. scientists to attend the SCAR Open Science Conference and also the SCAR Biology Symposium, the SCAR Earth Sciences Symposium. And the funding is especially for early career scientists, but we do fund other researchers as well to attend these meetings. Unfortunate, well, I don't know if it's unfortunate or fortunate, but the grant was actually awarded in April of 2020. And at that time, travel kind of came to a halt. So we are now in the process of having meetings that people can actually attend. And so you'll be seeing more calls for applications for travel awards coming up. For example, the SCAR Open Science Conference is next summer, and so we will be providing funding for people to attend that. The grant also provides support for the U.S. delegates, which is myself and Al Weatherwax, to attend SCAR business meetings, and for the U.S. representatives to the SCAR science groups to also attend business meetings. It has provided us with a way of having a very nice website. We have an email list, and we also have a U.S. SCAR fellow and an intern. And I'll go over all the people involved coming up in this presentation. So SCAR is an international body. It falls under the International Science Council. It was established in 1958. And there were 12 countries that were involved in Antarctic research during the International Geophysical Year from 1957 to 1958. And at that time, they recognized that the kinds of cooperation and collaboration that they had in the Antarctic was quite important in terms of promoting the science. And that was the reason why they came together and they started SCAR. So from 1958, with 12 members, we have now expanded to 55 total members in SCAR, 35 full member countries and 11 associate members, and then 9 of the ISC unions. And I think it's significant to point out that the year after SCAR was established, 1959, is when those same 12 countries started the Antarctic Treaty. And so the treaty and SCAR have been very closely associated for the past 65 years. SCAR's mission during that time has been twofold. So SCAR provides science leadership, and SCAR has been very successful in bringing together international groups and allowing for scientists to brainstorm, come up with ideas, and has helped to facilitate international collaborations in the Antarctic and the Southern Ocean. And SCAR is very much a grassroots or bottoms-up kind of organization. The ideas and initiatives are all coming from scientists who are out working in the field. The other part of SCAR's mission is to provide scientific advice. And so SCAR is an official scientific advisor to the Antarctic Treaty System And then we often get questions from other bodies who are interested in Antarctic and Southern Ocean issues. How does SCAR accomplish its mission? Like most organizations, we have a lot of meetings. So we have biennial delegates meetings and the science group business meetings. As I mentioned, those will be held next year with the Open Science Conference, and that meeting is in Chile. There's a lot of other meetings and workshops that get organized by SCAR subsidiary groups. There's the participation in the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting, and we have a large number of partnerships with other organizations. Some examples here, Council of Managers of National Antarctic Programs, SCORE, the Scientific Committee on Ocean Research, IASC, the International Arctic Science Committee, and I don't know if you can see the other acronyms in this diagram here, but there's probably a lot of them there that you are familiar with. But I think the most important thing about SCAR accomplishing its mission is the international Antarctic science community. And as I said, it's the scientists who come together through SCAR and come up with, what is the next important thing to look at in the Antarctic. And if you're interested in signing up for the SCAR newsletter, you can do that at the SCAR website, and you can get information on what's happening at the international level. SCAR does have a new strategic plan, and this just came out in April. It doesn't change SCAR's mission. The mission pretty much has stayed the same over the entire history of the organization, but it does highlight a number of things. There's a big focus on climate. SCAR has also a very strong commitment to equality, diversity, and inclusion in Antarctic sciences, reducing the carbon footprint of SCAR activities. So if you are interested in looking at the strategic plan, that is available online. And I think Isabel is putting the link in the chat. This next figure, I show this a lot, and I always have to preface this by saying it looks really busy, and it is, but I'm just trying to make a point. This is the organizational structure of SCAR. And as you can see, there's a lot of pieces. So we do have a lot of subsidiary groups. The delegates up here at the top are people that are appointed by national committees. And in the US, the National Committee is the Polar Research Board, which falls under the National Academies. From the delegates is elected a president and then also 4 vice presidents. And I'm currently this person here, Vice President for Science. And then we have the science groups. And these 3 science groups also have national appointees from the Polar Research Board, and then also the 2 standing committees that we're going to hear from today on data management and geographic information are also appointees by the Polar Research Board. The other boxes on here are all people who have volunteered, who have come up with an idea for some group that they feel would be important to put together in terms of Antarctic research. And all the different colors here are just representing different kinds of groups. So we have the science groups, which I just mentioned. In orange are the scientific research programs, and you'll be hearing more about these later on from the individual science groups. These are focused research initiatives that go on for about 6 years. The red and the green are expert groups and action groups. And again, these will have some specific focus. There's an expert group on krill, there's an action group on plastics. So there's a lot of different things. If you go to the website where this organizational chart is at SCAR website, you can just click on the boxes and it will take you to the group's website. So if you find something there that you're interested in, you should click on the link, find the leadership, sign up for their email list, and get in touch with the people in that group, because these groups are open. So they're more than welcoming to add more people who are interested in that particular topic. And then in lighter blue, we have the standing committees. And then down here in this more turquoisey color are the joint initiatives. And we have the Southern Ocean Observing System, which is a joint initiative with the Scientific Committee on Ocean Research. We have ICE, Integrating Climate and Ecosystem Dynamics, which is also joint with SCAR as well as with the International Geosphere Biosphere Program. And then the Southern Ocean Decade Task Force, which I'd like to talk about very briefly. This is a group that was coordinated by SCAR to address the Southern Ocean aspect of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And so the task force came up with the Southern Ocean Action Plan, which is also available online. And SCAR recently, in the last 2 weeks, was approved as a Decade Collaborative Center. So SCAR will now be the umbrella for UN Decade activities and projects that have been approved by the UN Decade and that relate to the Southern Ocean. Something else coming up that I'd like to mention to all of you is we are now in the process of organizing the 5th International Polar Year to start in 2032. And I just attended a meeting this morning at 6 a.m. my time, where we discussed the next steps in putting the 5th IPY together. So if you have any input into this, please let me know. At this point, we have a committee that's between SCAR and IASC working on this. And there will be a draft concept note that will be released in December of 2023, looking for community input. But if anybody has any really strong ideas or feelings about this, please let me know and we can incorporate that into the process. So you'll be hearing more about IPY 5. A little bit more about US SCAR. Here are the people that are representing the United States. Again, delegate, alternate delegate, myself and Al Weatherwax. And then we have the 3 science groups. And here are the people that are representing the US in those groups. And then we also have the 2 representatives to 2 of the SCAR standing committees that have national representation. And you'll be hearing from all of these people today and learning more about what these specific groups do. And then we also have liaisons with the Polar Research Board. We have a webmaster, and then we have a US SCAR fellow and an intern who have helped quite a bit in getting things ready for this meeting. In addition, there are a lot of US scientists who are involved with SCAR subgroups. And so here again, a very busy slide, but my point is that we have US scientists who are formally involved with all of these groups within SCAR. It's close to 200 scientists, and my guess is that there's actually a lot more. It's just very hard for us to capture all the names of people who are involved. But again, if you have an interest in any of the groups on that organizational chart, please check into it, or you can get in touch with me and I can put you in touch with the people that are running those. But it's a very open system. So if you want to get involved, it's very easy to do that. In terms of US SCAR, if you haven't yet, I hope you'll visit our website. You can sign up for our mailing list. I don't send out a lot of things. And what I do send out is strictly related to Antarctica and the Southern Ocean. So you can sign up for the mailing list at the bottom of the homepage at our website. We do have a Twitter account. And so if you'd like to follow us on Twitter, you can do that. And we do have a YouTube channel. And right now what's there are the presentations from the 2021 meeting. And then the presentations and the panels from this meeting will also be posted there, hopefully shortly after the meeting is over. And then you can also contact us at that email address, info@usscar.org, or you can just send an email to me directly if you'd like. And then I would also like to encourage people to register for the US Scientists Directory. This is something that we have at the website. It's I almost wanted to make this a contest, because what our webmaster Joe Sooney has done is he's taken all the entries from the directory and he's mapped them out. And the circles here indicate the number of people that are in the directory relative to the geographic location. So I guess I'll throw out a little contest here. If you think your area is underrepresented, then you need to sign up for the U.S. Scientists Directory. And this is a way for us to help keep track of who in the U.S. is doing work in the Antarctic. Right now, it's very hard to figure that out beyond going to the NSF awards database and just looking up PIs. But there's a lot more going on in the Antarctic and the Southern Ocean beyond just the principal investigators. So please consider registering, and we'd be very happy to have you sign up. And I'd like to see some changes in this map. And then lastly, again, I'd like to thank NSF Antarctic Sciences for funding US SCAR. It has really been a big change for us to have that kind of consistent support available, and it's allowed us to do a lot of things that we weren't able to do before. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those, and otherwise I'm going to turn it over to Al, who will moderate the panel about the SCAR science groups and the standing committees, which will be given by the US representatives.
Well, thank you, Deneb. And it's a pleasure to see so many people here at the first session, and how many people have registered for this meeting. I also want to echo thank NSF for all the support. It really has enabled Deneb and the team, the US SCAR team, to organize in a way that we have never been able to. So those of you new to SCAR, this is really this meeting, and just SCAR is a great way to learn and meet other people working in the Antarctic, and it's really probably one of the best ways to internationally make connections. So if you're just starting out earlier in your career, getting involved with SCAR really opens up so many opportunities to work internationally as well in the US. So we're going to dive down for the next few minutes into the three larger umbrella science groups. There's many things underneath, and then a few of the standing committees. So we're just going to get started right away with Julia Wellner from the University of Houston will speak a little bit about the geosciences group. So the screen is yours, Julia.
Thank you for that introduction, and I'm pulling up my slides. While I do that, I'll just say I'm Julia Wellner from the University of Houston, and I am a marine geologist. My graduate students and I work primarily on the Nathaniel Palmer, and currently primarily in the Amundsen Sea, but that varies. And we work with lots of other Antarctic scientists, oceanographers, sometimes biologists, glaciologists. We go to sea with a range of other people, and that sort of interdisciplinary science is really common in a marine setting. One of the things that's very interesting about SCAR is I think it's also always very interdisciplinary. And so I'm going to present the geoscience groups to you right now. But what you'll see is that lots of it is crossing different boundaries and could be presented under physical sciences or sometimes ocean work. And that's one of the reasons SCAR is so complicated and difficult to learn, but it's also what makes SCAR so interesting. So the aims of the SCAR Geosciences group are to understand history and natural variability of Antarctica's environments. That's an obvious one if we're interested in past environments so that we understand future ones. There's a specific focus on paleontology of the continent. If you're new to Antarctica, you might not know that there's spectacular dinosaur fossils and plant and fern fossils there. There's a specific focus on the bed of the modern ice sheet, so we can understand how the geology, the bathymetry, the topography is influencing modern ice behavior. There's focus on the basement geology, and the geodynamic processes shaping the continent today. So I'm going to introduce some of the specific action and expert groups. These are all on the SCAR website, so if you miss anything, that's okay. Please go to that website for the details under each category. So one of the action groups under geosciences is ADMAP, which is the Digital Magnetic Anomaly Mapping Project. And this is to compile and integrate all past Antarctic near surface magnetic anomaly data. And I mentioned this compile and integrate because that's what a lot of the action and expert groups are about, is not specific field programs or specific research questions, but these international interdisciplinary groups are pulled together as a way to integrate lots of existing data. The next group is called Antarchitecture. I personally think this might be one of the more confusing names of the different working groups. Antarchitecture is focused on creating an age depth model of Antarctica's ice using internal layers and surfaces that are created through radar. That might sound like a glaciology project rather than a geology project, but remember, there is no specific glaciology group within SCAR. There's geology and then there's physical sciences. And this group is focused on past glacial cycles, so looking at past characteristics of the ice sheet using those internal layers. So the group does fall within geosciences. Three more groups, all starting with A also. That A comes from Antarctica, so it's in lots of our groups, is ANTOS, the Antarctic Nearshore and Terrestrial Observing System. This is an expert group that is looking at environmental variability of Antarctica. And its goal is to really focus on integrating with other science groups. ANTPASS is focused on permafrost, soils, and periglacial environments. So that 1% of Antarctica that is not ice covered is a specific focus of this soils and permafrost group. ANTVOLC stands for the Antarctic volcanism. This is an expert group that is focused on, like the name implies, Antarctic volcanism, but really looking at the regional correlations between volcanoes and trying to look at linking them together to understand regional volcanic processes. The next one out of the A's is CGG, Connecting Geophysics with Geology. As somebody whose background is geology and geophysics together, I think this is an obvious one. They obviously go together, but this is a specific group to make sure that's happening. The action group is focused on identifying ways to link geologic investigations with drilling and improving our understanding of how Antarctica fit between Gondwana and Rhodinian supercontinents. So that's a very, very specific group compared to some of the others. Geoconservation is involved in a variety of topics, including not just protection and management of areas with geological and geomorphic significance, but also developing a code of conduct for research on those topics on ice. GIANT is focused on geodesy and the geodetic infrastructure of Antarctica, installing tide gauges and monitoring sea level change around the Antarctic coastline. GRAPE, which has sort of a complicated acronym, So GRAPE is the GNSS, or Global Navigation Satellite System, research and application for polar environments. I'm glad we have an acronym for it. This is focused on looking at weather and space weather related questions, specifically in any high latitudes. And I note that this one is co-sponsored with Physical Sciences, so you might hear about it again in a moment. IBSCO is one that I see as being very active. This is an expert group focused on the bathymetry of the Southern Ocean. And so this group integrates multi-beam data, which is the newly acquired swath bathymetry. And it's integrating those data sets in compatible ways, archiving them, making them integrated between different countries so that we are working towards a full bathymetric chart of the Southern Ocean. And lastly is RINGS, the group focused on identifying knowledge gaps about the ice sheet margin and ways to fill in airborne geophysical data where we don't yet know much about the margin. So that's the last of the ones you might have seen presented in past meetings, but there is a newly approved group called IcePro. This is actually the only one that I have direct involvement with. This group is the International Collaboration Effort for Improving Paleoclimate Research, or IcePro. And this is a group focused on getting samples from surface water during any underway cruise. This can be a cruise ship for tourists, or in my case, a cruise where we were going to Thwaites and Pine Island anyway. And then we are able to collect surface samples following a very specific protocol and make those available so that we have some modern analog when we're trying to work down core to get past history. Geosciences is also involved in two of the scientific research programs quite directly. One is Antarctic, which is involved in conservation and management of biologically sensitive areas. And the other is INSTANT, which stands for Instabilities and Thresholds in Antarctica. This is a scientific research program that is aimed at understanding Antarctica's contribution to sea level in the past, current, and future. It involves oceanographers, atmospheric scientists, geologists, glaciologists, and it has a huge number of subcommittees and people involved. The instant meeting will be this September in Italy. And so many of you might be planning on presenting there. And if none of those caught your fancy, please note that you're always able to start new groups. There are some steps to get it approved. IcePro, for example, was working unofficially before it went through the official approvals to be listed. But please reach out to your reps if you're interested in starting a new group. So finally, you saw our names in the beginning of Deneb's talk. I am one of the 3 US SCAR geoscience reps, along with Samantha Hansen and Huangji Ji, who are both also on the call today. And we are happy to answer your questions. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And there'll be questions at the end and a chance to go into the breakout rooms and ask very specific questions when we're finished up. So I'd like to move on to the physical sciences group, and it's Christy Tinto from Columbia University will give a little bit of an overview. So the screen is yours.
Thank you. And let me click all the right buttons. Is that full screen? Excellent. So yes, I'm Kirsty Dinto. I'm at Columbia University and I'm one of the 3 representatives to the physical sciences group. The other 2 are John Cassano, who is a meteorologist at UC Boulder, and Lulu, who is involved in the IceCube project looking at neutrinos, and she's based out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison and is on the call today, so can answer all the neutrino-based questions. The physical sciences group are basically here to look at any of the physical systems that are active in Antarctica at the moment, and also the physical systems that are observable from Antarctica. So it's a hybrid of looking at the processes that affect particularly the interactions between the ice and the ocean and the land and the atmosphere, but also the science that needs to use Antarctica as a platform. To be able to, I'm reading the bottom bullet point here, but the unique properties of the continent favor its use as a platform for astronomical and solar terrestrial observations. So it's a pretty big house, but there's a lot of cross-cutting groups that I'm going to summarize here. So as Julia already mentioned, and Deneb as well in her organizational chart, the scientific research programs are very big endeavors that involve a lot of different disciplines and a lot of different scientists. Physical sciences is involved with 3 of them. So there's AntClim now, which is interested in characterizing, observing and modeling the Antarctic environment as it is at the moment and on a timescale of years and decades. So it's a very near-term understanding of how these systems interact with each other. The next scientific research program for physical sciences is AntICON, who are interested in the sustainability and impact mitigation from human activities, and are really focused on taking science results and pointing them towards decision-making and policy and stewardship of the Antarctic continent. And then the last one, which Julia also mentioned, because it's co-sponsored between the groups, is INSTANT. So that one is kind of focusing in on sea level changes, but taking a paleo and a future perspective to put together that whole history of the Antarctic ice sheet and figure out what it's going to do to sea level in the future. And obviously that does engage a lot of different sciences to pull together into that question. We then start to pack more groups onto a page, just to distinguish between expert and action groups. Expert groups are longer term or ongoing endeavors that are drawing together communities of scientists and providing products and advice in ongoing ways. And action groups are kind of focused, we're going to get something started, or we're going to get something done. I'm kind of looking at Deneb to correct me if I get anything of that wrong. But physical sciences has 8 of each. So I'm going to run through them now. So the expert groups, the first of them is Antarctic Nearshore and Terrestrial Observing Systems, ANTOS. And that's co-sponsored with both of the other groups. And it's really focusing in on environmental variability and change at biologically relevant scales. So these groups coalesce around disciplines or specific systems, or sometimes what timescale they're looking at questions in. And so this one is really about biological timescales and processes. The next one on this slide is Antarctic sea ice processes and climate, which is called ASPECT. And the system that this is organized around is sea ice. So if you want to understand sea ice, you're going to find some friends in the ASPECT group. Then we move on to the Forum for Research into Ice Shelf Processes, FRISP. This is a long-running program, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. It wants to understand ice shelves in their entirety and their ice-ocean interactions and how they work. So it's very process-oriented and is started looking at the Filchner-Ronne and has expanded now to look at ice shelves in general. Then there is GNSS, Research and Application for Polar Environment GRAPE, which is co-sponsored with Geosciences, so you've heard about that one, but it's using the GNSS observing systems around Antarctica to explore weather and space weather phenomena. And then we have SORP, which is the Southern Ocean Regional Panel, which is looking at the climate variability of the Southern Ocean. So again, a pretty big house with a lot of different connections from it, but in each of these groups there are contact names for the people that you'd want to get hold of if you wanted to know more about that group specifically. Then the next up is the International Partnership in Ice Core Sciences. So I want to call it IPICS. You call it yourselves IPICS, but it's again, anybody who's interested in ice core sciences and all of the various questions that can be put to. And this is clearly an area that needs a lot of international collaboration. This is a place that the international collaboration can happen. Next down is operational meteorology in the Antarctic, which is called OPMET. And they are focused on the observations that are going on at present of the meteorology around Antarctica and feeding that into forecasts in a very operational time frame. And then next up is ice sheet mass balance and sea level, which is called ISMUS. And this operates on ice sheets in the north and the south. Its focus is on the mass balance of ice sheets and getting observations and models to work together and feed towards policymakers. So another pretty large expert group. Which brings me to the action groups. So these have their focused nearer term objectives that they are seeking to accomplish. The first of them is Antarctic Clouds and Aerosols, ACA. And their goal is to get coordinated ground and airborne campaigns to get measurements to inform study of aerosols and clouds. So to put together those specific sorts of surveys. ANGWIN, Antarctic Gravity Wave Instrument Network, similarly is trying to develop a network of gravity wave observations. So trying to establish the kind of relationships and coordination that you need to put together that observing network. Ice sheet margin rings, also co-sponsored with Geosciences. So you've heard of that one before. I'm involved with that one, so I shouldn't need my notes, but it's supporting coordinated air geophysical surveys of the Antarctic margin. So trying to pin down the boundary conditions that go into a lot of the other work by getting international collaboration on surveys. And then Tropical Antarctic Teleconnections, TATE, is looking at exactly that, the teleconnections between tropical and Antarctic climate systems and how they can be understood in order to feed into our broader understanding of climate processes. EOAG is the Earth Observation Action Group, and it's really focusing on advocacy for satellite programs for remote sensing from space and getting the kind of international collaboration that you need to make sure that there aren't gaps in measurements, or that you're measuring the right things, or the right people are collaborating to make something happen. So that's another big goal. Input pathways for persistent organic pollutants to Antarctica is called IMPACT. And they are interested in chemical inputs to the Antarctic region. They're shared with life sciences because chemical inputs to the Antarctic region affect the biological systems. And they're impact driven and trying to feed into policy. And then Antarchitecture is a physical system because we're looking at the ice sheet and is trying to establish a stratigraphy of the entire continent of Antarctica from ice penetrating radar. So it's a good combination between physical and geosciences. And then the last action group on this list is PRAMSO, which is Paleoclimate Records from the Antarctic margin and Southern Ocean. And they are interested in sediment drilling for climate and ice sheet research, and coordinating everything that it takes to get those sorts of things moving. So as you see, physical sciences is a big house. There's a lot of different work going on, and getting involved in any of these groups is very easy. If you see something that you just think, I need to be in conversation with those people, I need to meet somebody who has access to this space, who does the thing that I do, these are the people that you want to get hold of, and you will find that there is a community waiting for you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And before we head over into the next committee, the life sciences, I just wanted to make a quick note, and this doesn't fall under the physical sciences right now. There's the very large and exciting astronomy astrophysics community in the Antarctic. Actually is an expert group that falls under the executive committee of SCAR at the moment. And I just wanted to point that out right now, if you're looking, because you'll see so many talks on astronomy and astrophysics as well. So I wanted to point out how that structure, you might not have noticed it under the enormous structure that Deneb showed earlier on, how it's all organized. So it's a little bit how things are evolving now. But I just wanted to point out that's where the astronomy and astrophysics expert group is at the moment, under the executive committee. And I'll put some notes on that for later, so people can understand that. So the last group that we'll talk about, the life sciences group, and I think Byron Adams from Brigham Young University, there he is down there. Will you have the screen? So I will be quiet and please go ahead.
All right, thanks a bunch, Al. So I'll talk about the life sciences today, and the overview I want to provide to you, first of all, is that we're trying to understand the impact of past, current, predicted environmental changes on biodiversities and consequences for those ecosystems and the organisms that live there, their adaptations and functions. So another aspect of the life sciences that we look at is specific to even scientists and support staff that work here. So we're looking at interested in the effects of cold, dark, isolation, perhaps pathogens and those sorts of things for those who are working in the Antarctic. And then lastly, we're really interested in using multidisciplinary collaborations to understand the complex interactions between organisms and their environment, and being able to use those to predict consequences of change. And so are the representatives for the life sciences are myself and Chuck Amsler and George Waters, but I'm the one that's blathering on right now to you. The overview of the life sciences in general from the SCAR, at the SCAR level, the chief officer is Ian McDonald, and the deputy officer is Natalie Patton, and then I am also serving as the secretary. So that's at the SCAR level. I want to also talk about the programs, the scientific research programs, and the expert and the action groups. Many of these have already been discussed, but I'm going to try and mention them in the context of interest for those working in the life sciences. The ANT-ICON is the Integrated Science Informed Antarctic and Southern Area Ocean Conservation. And the goal really for this group is to use science-informed studies of ecology, of organisms and their ecosystems in order to inform policy making. So this organization here really is trying to use science in order to better inform policy for understanding and protecting the Antarctic. So the three themes that they're focusing on is the current state. So understanding like what's the baseline where we are now with these ecosystems and organisms and how they function, and then being able to project them into the future, right? Second of all, we're interested in sustainability and impact in order to mitigate human activities, including research, scientific research in the Antarctic region. And we're also interested in social ecological approaches to working in the Antarctic and Southern area and applying those to conservation strategies. So the first scientific research program I want to talk about is INSTANT. So this is instabilities thresholds in Antarctica. You heard Kirsty talk about these a little bit. This is where we're trying to understand sea level change, past and future. The biology here really is primarily paleoecology. So if you're a paleoecologist, if you're interested in doing that sort of thing, then there's a place for you in INSTANT. There's also a possible additional SRP to be proposed. So there are a lot of folks working in biological and ecological systems that don't really fit under the Ant-ICON umbrella. And so there's some interest in forming an additional or a new scientific research program to support focuses that are looking at basic biological processes and inferring processes from pattern. So if you're interested in those sorts of things, there is a movement going on to try and develop a new scientific research program there. The expert groups, ANTOS has already been discussed, but again, the ANTOS really is sort of like if you're an ecologist in North America, you might probably familiar with the NEON system, where they built this huge infrastructure in order to support ecological questions at large spatial scales. There's kind of an equivalent here with ANTOS, building environmental sensing nodes throughout that are sort of continent wide to inform changes that are going to reflect or have some sort of importance on ecological systems. There's also BEPSI. This is biogeochemical exchange processes at the sea ice interfaces. ABI is Antarctic Biodiversity Informatics. So if you're interested in biodiversity informatics, that's the one for you. EGBAM is a group that's working on birds and marine mammals. And a subgroup of that is the Antarctic Wildlife Health Network. So folks working on birds and mammals probably find a home there. There's the ICE-D or ICE. This is the Integrating Climate and Ecosystem Dynamics in the Southern Ocean. So if you're working in those areas, you'll find some friends there. There's also the JEG, what we call the JEGBAM. So this is the human biology and medicine. They work very closely with COMNAP. On the programs there, the national programs, again, working on issues that are associated with doing science and supporting science in Antarctica. There's SCEG, so that's a SCAR krill expert group, working on krill mostly in the Southern Ocean. And then there's the SOCPR, the Southern Ocean Continuous Plankton Recorder Database. So those are the expert groups that you might be familiar with. There are also some action groups that I want to talk about. So most of these are relatively new. So the Plastics in Polar Environments action group. So if you're interested in working on plastics, their fate, their impacts on Antarctic ecosystems, that's what they work on. Impact is the group that's working on organic pollutants in Antarctica, very similar. The Integrated Science for the Sub-Antarctica is ISA. So these are folks that are working exclusively in the sub-Antarctic. And so there's a group that tries to get them all together to integrate the science that they're doing in the different areas of the sub-Antarctic. And then there's also an action group on the remote sensing of birds and animals. This is joint also with the physical sciences, where you can use orbital data and things like that in order to do bird counts and animal counts and that sort of stuff. There are a couple of some recently proposed expert groups. So the Ross Sea Marine Protected Area is receiving a bunch of attention, and also the Antarctic Subglacial Environment Exploration Group. So this is also an interdisciplinary approach. A lot of engineering and technology development, as well as biology and ecology that's associated with this one. I think that's all I wanted to say about the life sciences, Al.
Terrific. Thank you very much. That was great. Good overview. And again, if people have questions, in the chat room, you'll be available. I'd like to move on to we have two standing committees, one on Antarctic data management and one on Antarctic geographic information. So Frank, if you could lead us in the data management, the screen is yours.
Yep. Thank you, Alan. Yes, Alan said, so my name is Frank Nietzsche. I'm the representative for the US at SCADAM, the Standing Committee of Antarctic Data Management. And so my background is I'm a research scientist at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory here at Columbia University, and I'm doing a lot of marine geophysics and seafloor mapping around Antarctica. And the last couple of years, also became heavily involved at the US Antarctic Program Data Center that I'm now a PI on together with Kirsty Tinto. So I'd like to give you a little background where, how SCADAM involved. So it's then I mentioned in the beginning, so after the initial polar year, the Antarctic Treaty was generated, and they were very forward looking, because in the treaty itself, it states that all the Antarctic scientific observation and results from Antarctica shall be exchanged and made freely available, which includes all the data as well. And for a long time, this was the basis of the operation. And then in the 1989, I think SCAR developed an ad hoc committee to basically find ways to increase the coordination between the different, data holding organization in the different countries. And then that led in 1997, basically, to another Antarctic Treaty Committee meeting resolution that actually suggested the establishing of a joint committee that was together with CONAP at this point on Antarctic data management and Antarctic directory system, basically a way to formalize the exchange of data between the countries and make it more available and make other countries more easily aware of what data were collected by the different countries. And in 2009, this went mostly under SCAR now and changed the name to the Standing Committee of Antarctic Data Management. At the moment, SCADAM has 32 countries that are represented, or where we have representative people from, with a core group of maybe 20 who are active. We do have monthly meetings virtually, and then we have an in-person meeting at the larger SCAR Open Science conferences or at some other polar data meetings. At the moment, SCADAM is led by Jonathan Cole from the Australian Antarctic Division, and the deputy officers are Helen Peat from the UK, from the British Antarctic Survey, and myself. The main goals of what SCADAM is trying to achieve is we want to promote long-term preservation and access of Antarctic data, make them available for everybody and make sure they are preserved. We also help SCAR and other bodies to establish and implement data policies and help designing best practices of data handling. And so we just helped to devise a new SCAR data policy last year. We also helping all the different countries to build national Antarctic data centers. Not all, some countries have very established data centers. Others are basically, especially new members of SCAR trying to build those up. So we help them with resources, guidelines, tips, how to build those data centers, and then also work to basically make the different data centers from different countries more interoperable. We also try to, make data more findable, accessible, interoperable, more usable. So not only preserve the data, but also make sure that they're preserved in a form that they can be used and shared more easily by other people. And we also provide guidance to the Antarctic metadata directory. This is a basic metadata directory hosted by NOAA, where all the countries are SCAR members are supposed to have some information about the data they collect in there. So there is one spot where people can find data collected. Some highlights of the things that we've been working on the last couple years. So one of the big things is the new SCAR data policy. It started as an effort between SCADAM, the Southern Ocean Observing Center and the Arctic Data Council to kind of harmonize the different data policies in the polar region that exists. And this resulted in a document where we have like recommended some principles about data sharing and data archiving, and how all the different policies in the different, in both polar regions basically can be better aligned. And this was the basis then for the new SCAR data policies that was released in 2022, which is now a SCAR report you can find on the webpage. And I got to post the different links after my talk. Another thing that I mentioned earlier also was, so we, at the moment, the main overarching metadata directory for all the Antarctic national data centers is the Antarctic metadata directory hosted by NASA as part of their common metadata directory system. And there's a special page for the Antarctic data there. And at the moment we have like 10,369 data records in there. And this is at the moment still like the main host, but we're also working, between all the different Antarctic data centers to implement a standard schema based on Google schema.org, where other like search tools can be basically directly search the different national data centers. And there's a prototype that's being built and that's live to be tested. It's some of the subgroups POLDER, which stands for Polar Data Discovery Enhancement Research. But basically what it is, it's a federated search portal that basically harvested all the individual national data archives where exists polar data and makes them searchable to one portal. At this test site, not all the national data centers are active, but a whole range of them. And this is going to be also continue to be developed in the next couple of years. Another thing that SCADAM is also involved in is organizing meetings. There is so-called the main meetings of Polar Data Forum, which is an open meeting. It's not a SCADAM business meeting it's open to everybody who is interested in polar data from the Arctic or Antarctic. And the next meeting, it will be this fall from October 30th to November 3 in Cambridge, UK, will be hosted by the British Antarctic Service. And registration is free, and there will be a virtual and an in-person component. So please, if you're interested in data, check this out, the website, and consider registering for this. And last but not least, since I'm also PI of the US Antarctic Program Data Center, so we don't have an official national data center. So NSF funded research usually goes to this USERP DC. NASA funded research goes usually to NSIDC data repository. But if you're working with NSF funded awards, you probably have dealt already with USERP DC. If not, please go to our website and check us out. You can register your project, your award basically. That's mandatory now under the new guidelines from NSF. And if you have any data sets that from Antarctica you're looking for a place to deposit, you can also use our repository service for that. And this is all I have. Thanks.
Well, terrific. Thank you. That's great to hear of what's going on with all the data, and it looks like an interesting meeting coming up. Our final standing committee. And just to mention, Frank will be available again in one of the chat rooms if you have some specific questions after the final talk. which will be given by Cole Kelleher, University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, on Antarctic geographic information. So again, the screen is yours.
Doing that.
Which yeah, Cole, yep, you're on mute.
Sorry, I just put some links in the chat for you guys all to follow along, if you choose to do so. So as Ellen mentioned, I'm the US SCAGI representative. So SCAR's Standing Committee on Antarctic Geographic Information. Its purpose is to manage and enhance the geographic framework for Antarctic science research, operations, environmental management, and tourism. We have representatives from 31 countries, with 19 countries actively attending the last SCAGI meeting in October of 2022. And we have an upcoming meeting this August, August 17th through the 18th. So we're a pretty active group. We have a number of products that we develop and maintain for the international Antarctic community. So I'm going to do a brief overview of kind of three primary ones, and then do a couple updates at the end. But our committee currently is co-chaired by China and the United Kingdom. And let me go into presentation mode. I'm getting ahead of myself as usual.
No, wrong screen. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. It's my double monitors do it every time. So the first one I want to talk about is the SCAR Antarctic Digital Database. This is basically a seamless compilation of geographic data for Antarctica. It's primarily topographic, but it is a web application that allows for the viewing, querying, and downloading of geographic data, such as coastlines, contours, rock outcrop polygons, that you can download for personal use in your GIS software or query within the application. And that is hosted by the British Antarctic Survey, with contributions from other SCAGI member nations. The SCAR Map Catalog is a catalog of international maps that is compiled and maintained by the Australian Antarctic Division. And it contains entries from over like 5,000 hard copy maps from 26 countries, about 1,000 digital maps. Most are available for download in full resolution, or not most, some. And the majority have a low resolution preview with some metadata and contact information on where to access them, should you be interested. But it's an extremely useful resource for international maps in one place. And then the SCAR Composite Gazetteer of Antarctica. This is a whole composite gazetteer for all of the place names in Antarctica from all the countries that are willing to participate and submit entries. It's been compiled from over 31 years and consists of about 39,000 names, which correspond to about 20,000 features, unique features. Place names information has currently been submitted from about 22 countries. And it's now a relational database, which is a new update and is related to the SCAR Map Catalog and the SCAR Feature Catalog, as well as the SCAR Flora and Fauna databases. So when you search, you can see all of that related information. And that's hosted by the Australian Antarctic Division, but collated by the Italian National Antarctic Research Program. A quick update that's relative to us. Just very recently, as of a few months ago, there was a major update to the USGS Geographic Names Information System, or GNIS. it went through a complete database overhaul and now includes over 11,000 updated improvements to coordinate locations for Antarctic place names that were conducted by Polar Geospatial Center, which is my home research group at the University of Minnesota. And along with that, there's a new web app interface, which I have a small screenshot of there, that also has a nice little web map to give geographic context to the features that you query. It's really exciting to have contributed to the place name accuracy improvements, because as some of you may know, the old place names database, some of the accuracy standards were rounded to the nearest minute of latitude and longitude, which is not accurate at all. So we've made some huge strides in improvement in terms of the accuracy of those, and hopefully they're super helpful for the community that go into the field. And then lastly, in October of 2021, SCAR published the International Principles and Procedures for Antarctic Place Names. So those are basically guidelines for national naming authorities to follow as they work to name features in Antarctica. This was a pretty large effort on the part of the working group on Antarctic place names within SCAGI. And then I actually had the opportunity to go to the United Nations headquarters in New York to the 2023 United Nations Group of Experts on Geographic Names meeting and present a report on the principles and procedures, and they were acknowledged and endorsed by the group of experts, and they encourage all SCAR member nations to follow those principles and procedures when conducting place naming efforts in the Antarctic. And that's about it for me. I'll be happy to talk over any further details. I should also mention, if you are conducting research in the field or in the Antarctic, and you're interested in naming a feature and feel there's a need to do so and want to put in a proposal, please follow the policy and guidelines at the US Board of Geographic Names Antarctic naming link that I put in the chat. Thanks so much.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank also all of the speakers who gave a little insight into the different science projects, the many science projects that are being done, and some of the other important data and geographic information and systems that are out there. So at this point, Deneb, I think I hand this over to Deneb, who will guide us into some of the breakout rooms for if you have some specific discussions or questions for any of the speakers. So I'd like to thank all of the speakers once again.